So this month, our webinar focuses on the topic of working with urban audiences to conserve birds. And we're going to hear broad perspectives on how environmental education can help build resilient communities. We're going to learn about some programs of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service that are designed to engage urban communities in bird and habitat conservation. And then we're going to wrap up by hearing in detail about a specific case study in the creation of the Valle de Oro National Wildlife Refuge in Albuquerque, New Mexico. So I'm very pleased to introduce our first presenter, Jose Marcos-Iga, better known as Pepe. And Pepe has over 20 years of international experience as an environmental communicator and educator with a background in capacity building, cultural competency development, and online training and networking. As the International Programs Manager at the Environmental Education Exchange, he has managed a wide array of bilingual networking and capacity building efforts for environmental educators along the U.S.-Mexico border, which include conferences, training workshops, and social media that reach thousands of educators on both sides of the border. Pepe has served on the National Association, the NAAE's board since 2007, expanding and diversifying the organization's reach, working with key partners to increase participation from Mexican and Canadian professionals, as well as from underserved audiences within the United States. As part of the Guidelines Trainers Bureau, he has taken the Guidelines for Excellence in Environmental Education to Spanish-speaking educators. Pepe holds a PhD and a master's in natural resources with a focus on environmental learning from the University of Arizona, as well as a master's and a bachelor's degree in communications and media arts from Monterey Tech and University of Monterey, respectively. So with that, Pepe, I'm going to pass it over to you.
Thank you. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. So hopefully you'll be able to be seeing my first slide in there, EE capacity. Thank you, Jennie, and thanks everyone for giving me a little bit of time to talk today. I am going to, because we have very little time, I'm going to be just giving little samples of some of the things happening at the national level that are, many of them, part of the EE capacity project. And I want to talk about EE capacity because a lot of what we're doing and a lot of the core of EE capacity is trying to work more and offer more capacity building for environmental educators, specifically in urban areas. So we offer programs and opportunities for any environmental educator, no matter where they live, but there's an emphasis on working more in cities. And this is some of the people that are part of the leadership team of the project, and as you might have heard, EE Capacity is EPA's National Environmental Education Training Program. And it's a 5-year grant, and we are in year 4 of the project at this point. The whole idea around EE Capacity and the whole idea about trying to innovate in a changing world is to bring new ideas by linking diverse environmental educators, both professionals and volunteers. And that means those who call themselves environmental educators, but also those who don't necessarily call themselves environmental educators, but do, as part of their work, like I bet many of you do, education. And why innovation in environmental education? Well, there is a trend around the world of urbanization. People are moving into cities, and we see that happening more over the years. And I apologize, my voice might go away once in a while. I'm recovering from a really bad cold. But this urbanization and this change is basically bringing new challenges and bringing new opportunities. So we need to find innovative ways of approaching them. And so you have new complex issues around pollution and around common areas in urban areas where you can apply many of the things that you use in rural areas and you have the same problems of tragedy of the commons, but there's also other challenges like issues around poverty and gentrification and violence, and then you have climate change affecting many coastal urban areas with flooding and other natural disasters. So how do we keep environmental education relevant for this new world of urbanization and climate change and all of these other urban issues? And what's the role of innovation around this? So social innovation needed for EE in an age of urbanization, climate change, and new community and environmental stresses. That's the main reason why we're thinking that the field needs to innovate. And how do you innovate? By bringing different ideas and different views together. You offer the platforms for people who have different views of the world, different approaches, to talk, to exchange ideas, to learn from each other. And hopefully social innovation theory says that you're going to have new and more effective practices. And that's what we're trying to do with EE Capacity. So the premise is that you have a network of professional environmental educators. You have the organized network of environmental educators that's represented by groups like the North American Association for Environmental Education, but also many other networks out there like Project Learning Tree and many others, and the state affiliates and the different organizations, and even groups like this one, groups that meet online. And then you have, and they have, these groups tend to have also guidelines and documents and ways to operate that are already well established. And then you also have loose networks of professional youth and community development in community groups, churches, and many other groups that are basically doing environmental education, but they don't call it that. But their goals are very similar, and there's so much to be learned from what they're doing, and I think both ends of the spectrum in this network, I don't see it as two complete separate networks, but both ends of the spectrum have a lot to share. So EE Capacity is using that premise to offer platforms face-to-face, online, and in many different ways, like workshops and online courses and learning communities, to basically bring these people together, people that might not have been working together in the past, with the hopes that that's going to have emerging new networks that are going to be learning from each other, and that is going to lead them to innovate in the field of environmental education, so that we take what we've done in the past and we apply it to new challenges with new ideas that are, again, coming from places where we perhaps haven't looked before. And that means that we are reaching out to partnering with groups that are doing all kinds of things. We partner with AZA, Celebrate Urban Birds from the Lab of Ornithology, but also many small gardening, urban gardening groups. We have, you can see here, the Wounded Warriors in Action, which is helping through hunting and fishing and other outdoor experiences, helping people coming back from war basically re-engage in their communities and re-enter their communities, as well as groups of faith, different religious groups, especially in urban areas, we're working with too. The other way we're doing this is we're applying this model to a state level and a regional level. So we're giving this grant to different states. We've done it with all the states you see here, plus one region, which is New England. And they get a certain amount of money, and then they get training and tools from us. But the idea is that they are going to use this to basically create a network of 20 new partners that are going to start sharing through workshops and meetings, et cetera. And there's been great things happening with those groups. And I'm I think I saw the list of participants to this webinar, and I saw a couple of people who are involved with some of the state consortia. And then we have dissemination partners who you can see on the list here go from large, well-organized groups like the Associations of Zoos and Aquariums to smaller groups that are, yes, well-organized, but perhaps don't have as many resources, but they have a lot to offer and a lot to bring. And so we're bringing them together. And we do this always through the lenses of the Guidelines for Excellence in Environmental Education from NAAE and the National Project for Environmental Education Excellence. And this is something that's being funded by EPA for a while now. But what we're trying to do is develop a new set of guidelines that deal with working with communities. And this has been possible through the work of many people, especially Akima Prize, who worked for the first 3 years of the project, 3.5 years of the project, to basically go around and do roundtables and workshops and many other exchange opportunities online and face-to-face to capture stories and capture ideas from the people who are working in the communities, most of them urban communities. And so this is going to help us develop this new set of guidelines that hopefully will help environmental educators who either are not comfortable or familiar working in urban areas, or also people that work in community already in urban areas but are not as comfortable with the EE part of it, the education part of it. And we're hoping this is going to help both. We're going to be opening this as we write them. We're going to be opening the opportunity for people to comment. So check the website that I'm going to share at the end, eecapacity.net, because we're going to be posting it there. And also, we've been offering online courses, including an ongoing one on urban environmental education that I highly recommend, that Alex Kudryavtsev from Cornell University has been offering. And he brings many of the voices that are leading efforts in urban environmental education. He's also offering it as a project learning community, which is what I'm going to talk in a few minutes. Another thing that I think there's going to be several of you who are already part of this group, but I highly recommend, if you're not part of it, that you join it, is the Urban EE Collective. This was started by EE Capacity. It was an idea of Akima Prize. Well, Akima Prize, if you don't know her, she's been getting involved in community group in urban areas for a very, very long time. She started this group on Facebook, and she's been promoting it and keeping it alive. And right now you can see there it says we have a little over 1,000 people. This is an old slide. We are going way over 1,500. I'm going to move a little faster because I think I might not have enough time to get to the fun part of this. But we also do research and offer a connection between research and practice. And there's resources, again, that you'll see a link later that you can get to. Professional learning communities are opportunities online where basically you invite a group of people who are interested in a specific topic, like urban environmental education, and they work together to produce an ebook or a guide or a series of lessons or any other product that they decide they want to work together on. That way they're learning through the project, the creation of the project, and they're exchanging ideas, and they're furthering the topic, and then they're producing something that is helping other environmental educators out there. And there's already several publications that came out of it, one on urban EE, another one on measuring environmental education outcomes, and we are working right now on one with the Cornell Lab of Ornithology, Celebrated Urban Birds, on EE en Español. People that is working with or trying to work with the Hispanic community or Spanish-speaking communities. And I've been working on this with Marta Del Campo and Karen Purcell from CLO. And it's been a great experience. And finally, there's many other things happening with e-capacity, but this is the last one I want to mention because I want to share some of the examples of some of the things that people are doing out there, some of our partners. The climate change, the Community Climate Change Fellowship, we piloted this last year. And we had 26 fellows from all over North America. And basically, we selected people who are working within or at a community-based level and that are trying to develop innovative solutions to climate change using environmental education. And most of them are working in urban areas. Many of them are working with birds. We have somebody from Mexico that you might know. I don't have his name right now in front of me, Luis Kincaid. And he's not in an urban area, but he was also one of the fellows. But again, not everybody's doing work with birds, but we had a few of them. And it's been great to see how this group has been exchanging ideas online after the fellowship. We are hoping to offer a new round of fellowship opportunities for 25 to 30 people. So again, we're going to announce that on the Urban EE Collective on Facebook, and we'll also have it on the website of EE Capacity. And we are research and evaluation is offering tools, but it's also testing this model. And so something that we are doing using social network analysis, we have there's a great researcher at Cornell ULE from China who's doing research on social network analysis and using other methods as well. We have the EE Ecology Mental Map and QSort, which are tools, by the way, that are available for you, and you can find links on EE Capacity website. But when we measured the connections of the members of the state consortia of Colorado before we gave them the award, before we gave them the grant and they started working, this is loosely how the network looked like. And then after a year, this is how it looked like. So you can see there's a lot more connections between the different members. Now, it's been about 2 years since we gave them the funding. And so we're hoping that when we test this again and we survey them, we're going to see a more convoluted network, a network with a lot more connections and stronger connections. So that's just a little taste of that. And a lot of what we're doing follows, and a lot of also what we teach in workshops and what we're trying to share follows many of the ideas of you've probably seen this before, the 4 quadrants of whole communities from the Center for Whole Communities, where you have the different areas of, I guess, concern or issues around the environment, and you have nature and people on one end and the other, and then you have haves and have-nots. So there's issues that perhaps concern people who are well off or who have money and resources related to nature, and then there's others complete like wilderness and conserving, protecting endangered species, clean oceans, and then those who are on the poverty side of things might be on the nature side more concerned about water pollution, air pollution, land ownership, etc. And the same thing with people. The issues that concern people who have resources, like maybe eating organic, might not be the same issues as people who are on the poverty side of things, where they might be concerned about public health, even just safety and gang issues. If you live in an urban area and you're a member of a specific group, it's going to be different what you're concerned about because you live in a community, again, where there's a lot of violence, or where there's a lot of air pollution, or there's many other issues, or you live in a food desert. So forget about organic. There's not even any fresh fruit and vegetables available. So the idea, and I apologize, the circles are in Spanish. I'm noticing that because I used this for a workshop in Querétaro, in Mexico. But that where you might be with your goals of conservation education, for example, if you're concerned about protecting birds and teaching people about birds in urban areas, or even just get them engaged so that you can get citizen science, so you can get data, might not be necessarily where they are on the concerns they have that might or might not be directly related to nature, but are connected to the environment anyway. So you have to find that common ground between and find a way to have a program that is going to address their concerns and your goals. And so that's being at the core of the work we've been trying to do with e-capacity. And 3 quick examples, and I'm not sure how much more time I have. Am I out of time?
You're fine.
Okay, so I'll take another 3 minutes, hopefully. So there's 3 quick examples. First, a fellow from the Community Climate Change Fellowship, Gatna Ramirez from New York City. She is working with an organization called Global Kids. And basically what she's doing is she's offering, a mini fellowship to high school students. And these are high school students in an underserved area. Many of them are Spanish speakers. Again, these are many of these kids have not been involved in anything related to climate change. And as part of the program, she took them to the climate change march that happened last year in New York. And she's been getting them involved with many other networks. And they are learning how to engage. They're learning how to be active in their community, and they're also learning about the issues and how they connect to their own issues they have in their community. And for her, participating in this fellowship allowed her to learn a lot from what others were doing in other parts of the country and connect to many partners in other parts of the country that then offered or expanded the scope of opportunities for her students, which is great. And then we have dissemination partners, Celebrate Urban Birds. I'm pretty sure you're all familiar with what they do, and they're working in mostly urban areas, and they're working with community-based groups, and they're incorporating local issues, but they're also incorporating art into the science part, the citizen science part of their work. And they've been great with the work we've been doing with this online learning community, where we have many of the leaders from their community-based organizations participating in this group, and we're about to, in a few months, have ready an ebook that hopefully you'll all be able to see, that's going to be in English and Spanish, that's going to share case studies, ideas, resources, and just a lot of great stuff related and resources related to reaching out and working with Hispanic audiences, mostly in urban areas. Finally, Mo Better Green. Beverly Grant, she has this group, Mo Better Green, which is basically bringing a farmer's market and bringing the whole local food movement into a historic neighborhood in Denver, Colorado, that was a food desert. And she joined our project as part of the state consortium in Colorado. And so this is a partnership, one example of how having one of the partners being the Colorado State Association for Environmental Education, working, or what we would call the traditional environmental education network, the people who've been networking and leading the field of EE in the state as a network, networking with someone like Beverly, who is doing education, even though she doesn't call herself an environmental educator. And so she brought a lot to the table, but she also learned a lot from the group, and it's a partnership that continues. That's it. More information, you can find it on ecapacity.net. Also, I want to just make a quick announcement. You should come to the conference in San Diego, the North American Association for EE. It's going to be great. And there's going to be a lot of the people that organizations featured in this presentation are going to be doing workshops and sessions. And it's a great way to connect and learn about urban EE. We have a new special interest group for the organization that's only exclusively working on urban environmental education. And you can join. You can come to their meeting, but if you don't come to the conference, you can always join online. If you want more information on how to join online for this group, when we have the space online for the group, just send me an email. Jennie is going to put my email later on the screen. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Pepe. Jordan just posted a reminder in the chat pod, very polite reminder. I'm not going to be quite polite. If you are not the presenter, please mute your phone. Even if you're not speaking, it cuts down on the quality of the recording and on the ability of other people to hear. So I would thank you very much. If you have been talking during the webinar, I understand people multitask, but just assume that we can hear you. There are several people that were having conversations that we were a little bit privy to there, and we'd like to cut down on that. Our next presenter is Alicia King, who's the Communication Coordinator and Urban Bird Treaty Program Coordinator for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service Migratory Bird Program. Prior to working for the Fish and Wildlife Service, Alicia was the Director of the Bird Conservation Alliance for American Bird Conservancy. She also served as the Education and Cause-Related Marketing Manager for a national bird feeding retail franchise of over 300 retail bird feeding and nature stores, and worked as a naturalist in Florida, where she created and presented educational programs. Alicia served as a host on the Birdwatch television program for Public Broadcasting Service and hosted the bird feature segment on Discover the Wild for Wyoming PBS. She created and regularly appeared as a host on the television segment For the Birds for the Indianapolis CBS affiliate Wish TV. Alicia is the author of the Orvis Beginner's Guide to Birdwatching and regularly conducts workshops and presentations on birds and their conservation. She served on the Association of Field Ornithologists Council, the Ornithological Council, the Board of Directors for Operation Migration, and currently serves on the American Ornithologists Union Committee on Conservation. Alicia is a songbird rehabilitator, bird bander, and is an active bird watcher. She lives with her family in the Washington, D.C. area. And Alicia, I'm going to pass it over to you.
Great. Thank you, Jennie. So good morning or good afternoon, everyone. So today I am going to focus my presentation on giving a very broad overview of the urban wildlife conservation programs with U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. So I'll just kind of step through what we have and what our goals are with those particular programs, and give just a little kind of overview of what each of those hopes to obtain in the urban audiences that we're trying to reach. And then I'm going to give a quick overview of the Urban Bird Treaty Program and how that relates to wanting to connect to urban audiences, in particular related to birds and their conservation. And then that will segue nicely into Jennifer Owen White, who will give a more detailed example of actually being a part of many of those wildlife conservation programs. And bear with me while I kind of fumble through my slides. Don't seem to be changing on the screen. So I'm assuming, there we go. So the urban, I think most of you know that the urban audiences are growing, so not only are people moving into urban areas, but the urban areas populations themselves are growing. And there is definitely the feeling that unless we get urban folks connected and caring about the nature that's around them or understanding the nature around them, they're not going to care about nature outside of their own particular area. So the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service has organized some of their conservation programs to hopefully reach a lot of these urban audiences. A lot of people think of U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service having their wildlife refuges, which are kind of off limits to people, which is not necessarily true, but hard necessarily for urban audiences to reach. So we do have a number of refuges that are within an hour distance of most cities, and we do have a qualification of urban wildlife refuges. So those urban wildlife refuges are unique, and I'll explain those a little bit more. And then we have our urban partnerships. And under those urban partnerships, we have the Urban Bird Treaty Program, the Urban Conservation Partnerships, and the Urban Wildlife Refuge Partnerships. And those at some level engage in our wildlife refuge system, as well as in urban areas where there is actually not an urban wildlife. And this is our refuge. So this map just kind of shows you some of the targeted programs that I'm going to talk about today. And within the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, we have regional priorities and regional focuses, and that's simply the matter of all of the regions want to really prioritize, where they're reaching these urban audiences. And I'll go back to an Urban Bird Treaty map a little bit later in my presentation. So one of the things related to these partnerships that the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service is working on is that developing standards of excellence was pretty important in the partnership work that the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service does. So being able to really take any kind of program and any kind of group of people and partners that want to work on relating to these urban audiences, the idea is that these standards are incredibly important from building on and building a successful program. So being able to know and relate to the community. So not all communities are created the same, and not all communities have the same social awareness or the same culture or the same, education or level of citizen involvement. So being able to know and being able to relate to the community at an individual level is important, and it is it is the first standard of excellence. And two, connecting urban people with nature via stepping stones of engagement. So recognizing that you can't just push people into nature and go, okay, ta-da, we're good. So being able to use various ways to kind of step them into and over bridges and over fences or barriers to become engaged in this urban wildlife desire. Building partnerships. And so this Urban Standards of Excellence goes through very detailed explanation for how do we build those partnerships and how do we make them sustainable and how do we engage the right partners to be able to get the things done that we want to accomplish in these urban environments. And then being a community asset. So being able, not just throwing money at a program or not just throwing, some partnership ideas out, but really becoming a long-term asset. So being a part of the community, being engaged in that community, and being able to, make that something that really is an asset. And then ensuring adequate long-term resources. So again, throwing money at a problem does not necessarily resolve anything, but being able to set up a way so that resources can be not just that short term in the first year or two of a project, but on into the future and making sure that there are ways to engage, through that long term of being able to adequately fund and really have those resources to make sure projects are successful into the future. And then providing equitable access. So are people able to reach a program? Are they able to go to an urban refuge? Are they able to attend a workshop or, a bird walk or some kind of conservation effort that's taking place? So if you decide that you want to have a community and you've got everybody together and you're like, we're going to plant plants along the river and this is going to be awesome and they're going to grow and nobody can get there. So, how do we make sure that the programs that we do and the things that we're designing are actually accessible to the people that we're inviting? And then the seventh standard of excellence is to make sure visitors feel safe and welcome. And so I'll give you an example of several things that the Urban Bird Treaty Program did to help make people feel welcome. But they're, again, in the Standards of Excellence, and they are available online. There's lots of how do we do this, how do we make this happen. And then the eighth and last Standard of Excellence is model sustainability. So, taking all of these things and making sure that we really are sustainable, that into the future it will be able to, to move forward without too many barriers. So let me just review what urban wildlife refuges are. So typically they're 25 miles within an urban area, a population of 250,000 people or more. They potentially host large numbers of visitors from diverse backgrounds, so they have the opportunity, to engage people of all cultures within that particular urban area. And they are able to actually engage those urban audiences with and connect them to wildlife conservation, achieving those standards of excellence that I mentioned. And in the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, our director actually designates these urban wildlife refuges as such. And their goal is to really foster that environmental awareness through their outreach programs and activities that can really help get the population engaged in supporting what we do in fish and wildlife conservation. So it's great to have people come and visit our urban wildlife refuges, but we really want it to extend past their visit at the urban wildlife refuge. We also have our designated urban wildlife refuge partnerships, and if you'll remember in my earlier graph, they were kind of to the right underneath the partnership category. So we had the three partnerships, the urban wildlife refuge partnerships and the urban conservation partnerships and the urban bird treaty program, which is built on partnerships. And so these urban wildlife refuge partnerships are long-term place-based, so they often happen at urban areas where we can really foster that connection with understanding fish, birds, and wildlife and their habitats. And again, that connection that goes beyond when they just visit that particular partnership activity related to the urban wildlife refuge. And then urban conservation partnerships are very long-term cooperative arrangements between the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. So it could be any of our offices, whether we're an ecological service office, whether we're a migratory bird office, or a refuge office, or an international affairs office that's located anywhere in the United States. And that is, working on engaging those urban communities. And so looking at what kind of partnership opportunities are available. And even if they can't reach a refuge or they can't participate in the actual refuge stuff that's going on, whether it's at the urban refuge or another refuge or with the refuge partnerships, they can still have an urban conservation partnership that really focuses on those same goals and objectives. Some of the urban wildlife refuge partners, and I throw this up there just so those of you on the phone can kind of have an idea of where these are there. So they're stretched across the nation, and if you remember the map I showed you earlier, all of those dots, those were all some of those very focused refuge partnerships in the conservation partnerships as well as the urban refuges. So they're all over the place, and there are many of them that overlap. Not only are they maybe an urban bird treaty, they're an urban refuge, and they're urban refuge partnerships, and they're also conservation partnerships. And Jennifer will certainly give you an example of that in her presentation. So let me step into a little bit finer microscope, so to speak, of the Urban Conservation Treaty for Migratory Birds, which we call the Urban Bird Treaty. And it is a unique collaborative effort between U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and participating cities and their partners. And the partnership part of this program is incredibly important. So cities and their partners work to conserve birds through education, through hazard reduction, through participating in citizen science, through doing very concrete on-the-ground conservation action, and doing conservation and habitat improvement strategies in those urban and suburban areas. So thinking about these urban areas and really trying to understand what's going on with the birds in each of these cities and what are the things that we can do to conserve birds through our actions and through this particular program. Public awareness is a huge part of the Urban Bird Treaty, and this happens more specifically in cities as opposed to being kind of that national broad brush of public awareness. So that kind of public awareness, what's important for the conservation of migratory birds in my urban community and what's going on. And when we can get people enthusiastic about birds and what's going on in their communities, and they can be informed of what things are detrimental to those birds, and therefore detrimental to their all-over health and well-being in those urban areas, and then empower them to become involved and become engaged. And we truly believe that anyone can make a contribution to bird conservation, no matter where they are within that urban community. They have an opportunity to do something that allows them to participate in bird conservation. And so these partners work, or the city's partners work with partners to accomplish specific goals related to the Urban Bird Treaty Program. And right now we have, it's well over 300 partners and many resources that support the work of across the nation with these urban areas in conserving birds. And we created a program handbook. It's a guide kind of to help walk through all of the goals and talk about the various things that can be done within urban settings, providing flexibility to look at how many people do you have to help participate, and what kind of partners are out there to help you participate, and what are kind of some of the education outreach things you can do, and how can you really engage city leadership. And one of the things that we ask is that you engage the city councils or whatever the government structure is, as well as state legislators and even the governor in your particular area. So the Urban Bird Treaty has 6 goals: protect, restore, and enhance habitats for birds, reduce hazards to birds, educate and engage citizens, foster youth environmental education, manage invasive species to benefit and protect birds, and then increase awareness of the value of migratory birds in their habitats. So within each of those goals, we have sub-goals and objectives that look more specifically into how can you accomplish these goals. So I'll give a couple examples as we walk through some of the cities. I just want to give you an idea of the current Urban Bird Treaty cities. So we started in 1999 with the first Urban Bird Treaty, which was New Orleans in Louisiana. And we just, about a year and a half, almost 2 years ago now, signed on 2 new cities, Albuquerque, New Mexico, and Denver, Colorado. And so we've had a number of grant opportunities for these cities to actually become Urban Bird Treaty cities. And we just closed a grant opportunity that we had to engage not only current Urban Bird Treaty cities, but the potential for a couple new Urban Bird Treaty cities. And we did that through NIFWIF. In addition to the Urban Bird Treaty Program, having monies for the NIFWIF funding program, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service Urban Refuge partnerships also had funds that we put into that pot. So U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service had almost $600,000 that we put into that particular grant program, and we just finished reviewing all of those grants. And the next grant cycle will probably be next year, I'm going to say January, actually, of 2016, for the 2016 year. So let me just give a couple examples of cities that I've worked with. So the Washington, D.C. is an Urban Bird Treaty city, and the Urban Bird Treaty city worked with many, many partners to create a Lights Out program, to do some awareness on other predators or other things that are hazards to birds, such as avian species and free-roaming cats. And we did an awful lot of public outreach programs that were related to, educating people just in general about what birds are in the Washington, D.C. area. And we had the Earth Conservation Corps do some bird banding. They banded an osprey, and Secretary Sally Jewell came out and participated in this particular program. And you can see the map at the bottom with the red lines that was tracking these ospreys that the youth actually built. The Earth Conservation Corps folks, kids, actually built osprey platforms and then actually participated in the tagging of the birds and participated in education programs that ECC did related to this project throughout Washington, D.C. So getting to go into audiences of kids who had never actually seen birds other than maybe pigeons or doves and never really knew what these birds were all about, including, how far they can fly or, what their habitat requirements are. And we also participated in some bird counts for youth. We called them the New Year bird counts, and they were modeled after the CBC count for youth, and which was modeled after the CBC, the Christmas bird count that was started by Audubon over 100 years ago. So a lot of education and outreach. And one of the things, one of the organizations we partnered with was the Environment for the Americas, and we worked with partners to participate in International Migratory Bird Day events, and we really focused on getting diverse audiences, especially Latino and Mexican American audiences, to come to our International Migratory Bird Day. And I had mentioned earlier that in the Standards of Excellence, really being able to know your community and get out there and make them feel welcome and feel safe. And so we hired some young Latino interns to help us, and we engaged them in really kind of figuring out what does our audience look like, how can we reach these audiences, what do we need to do, and they created a poster, and I apologize, this one is not in Spanish, but we had Spanish materials as well as English materials. They went to media outlets. They've reached out to a lot of audiences to try to figure out, who can we engage in getting into these into this International Migratory Bird Day event. And over 50% of our attendees were not white people who normally tended to attend these kinds of events that we held. And so in contrast, this last year, we didn't have the interns, we didn't have quite that emphasis on reaching those audiences, and our audiences were not as diverse as they had been the year that we reached out to this particular audience. So that kind of outreach and that kind of engagement really, really worked. Indianapolis, Indiana is one of our other examples, and they actually created a website which was kind of a one-stop shop. If you want to know about birds in Indianapolis, come here. They started a Lights Out program. They started an education program where they paid for students to hire buses to bring them from the inner city schools out to one of the largest urban cities, actually in the country. I think it's the third largest urban park in the country. And so that was highly successful. So these kids had not had the opportunity before to go to that kind of urban park environment, and because of that barrier of not getting them in. So the particular things that happened were them being able to learn more about birds in their urban environment, building chimney swift towers and looking at the peregrine falcons that were nesting in downtown urban Indianapolis, as well as just going on bird walks and being able to kind of look at really the really cool things that were going on in their urban environment. So that was a quick overview of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service programs, as well as a highlight of the Urban Bird Treaty Program. And as I had mentioned earlier, Jennifer Owen White has engaged in Albuquerque's engaging multiple of these opportunities for partnership. And so, Jennie, I am going to end there and turn it back to you.
Thanks so much, Alicia. One last reminder, well, maybe not last reminder, but another reminder, we're recording the webinar, so please mute your phones if you are not the presenter. We appreciate it. I would do it universally, but my system does not allow me to do that. Our final presenter is Jennifer Owen White, who is the first refuge manager of the new Valle de Oro National Wildlife Refuge in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Valle de Oro is the first urban refuge in the Southwest and part of a larger push by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to reach urban audiences and connect them to the important habitats and wildlife that the service protects. Before taking the position at Valle de Oro, Jennifer was the refuge manager at the Santa Ana National Wildlife Refuge in Texas, and also served as the visitor service manager for the South Texas Refuge Complex. Jennifer is proud to be both a biologist and visitor services specialist. She was born in Chicago, grew up in Houston, and has a BS in biology as well as an MS in wildlife science from Texas Tech University. Jennifer is completing her PhD in forestry and natural resource interpretation from Stephen F. Austin State University, where she is focused on connecting urban communities to conservation and the outdoors. And we're going to pass control over to Jennifer, and I will turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you. Hopefully everyone can hear me, and I think I'm sharing my presentation, so hopefully you can check it out. As everybody said, my name is Jennifer. I'm the refuge manager for the new Valle de Oro National Wildlife Refuge in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And what I'm going to talk to you about today is kind of a little case study about Valle de Oro, how we were formed, where we are now, where we're going, and how all of this fits into the urban refuge standards of excellence. So in 2012, then Secretary of the Interior Ken Salazar came to New Mexico, came to Albuquerque, and named Valle de Oro as the Southwest's first urban national wildlife refuge. And this was really important because this was during a time when we weren't really establishing new refuges. Fish and Wildlife Service was just getting into this urban refuge initiative and trying to figure out where we're going. And you'll see through my presentation, part of the reason that this refuge was established wasn't just because Fish and Wildlife wanted it to happen. It was really more because the community wanted this to happen. And you'll learn a little bit more about our Mountain View community in just a minute, but it's really important to note that this was a project that was spearheaded by local community members. This land that became the refuge had been for sale since the 1990s, and there were lots of things that were proposed for this property. And the community, which is a high environmental justice community with multiple Superfund sites and brownfield sites and lots of dirty industry, came together and said, if this land's going to be for sale, we want something positive to happen with it. And so this is a great example of collaboration between federal agencies, state, local agencies, and communities to create something that's really great for wildlife, but as an urban refuge is especially great for connecting urban audiences to the outdoors. So Valle de Oro, as I said, is the first urban refuge in the Southwest. It's 570 acres. That was the Valley Gold's Farm, or Price's Dairy, which was a really well-known dairy in the Albuquerque area. And they had taken cows off the property about 20 years before it became a refuge, but continued to farm it for grasses and alfalfa for hay. The purchase price of the 570 acres was $18.5 million, and that included pre-1907 water rights. So any of you who live in New Mexico or who live in the West in general understand how important water rights are to a lot of things, but especially a project like this. $18.5 million isn't pocket change. It's not something that U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service was necessarily going to be able to come up with ourselves. And so you'll see in a little bit how a bunch of different groups came together to make this happen. The refuge itself is just 5 miles south of downtown Albuquerque, and 45 to 70% of the entire population of New Mexico lives within 30 to 90 minutes of this refuge. So 45% of our state's population is basically Albuquerque, and they're within 30 minutes of this property. Now, in New Mexico, we also have other really great national wildlife refuges like Bosque del Apache, but many of the people who live in the Albuquerque area have never been to Bosque del Apache. Bosque del Apache attracts people from all over the country and all over the world. So a place like Valle de Oro not only connects people to the outdoors in their own backyard, but is hopefully going to inspire people to want to take that trip a little further south, another hour and a half down to see Bosque del Apache and see what a traditional national wildlife refuge is like, with, tens of thousands of acres and endangered species and critical habitat. So if you are seeing a picture on your screen of a blank farm field, that is what Valle de Oro looks like right now. It is 570 acres of grass and alfalfa. That being said, there's still a lot of wildlife out there, but this is the perfect time to get the community involved in the project. We don't want to buy the land, plan everything, build it, and then turn it over to the community and say, hey, look what we made, we hope you like it. The whole idea of Valle de Oro is it was a refuge that was started by the community, it's for the community, it's designed by the community, and there's ownership and stewardship of this land. It's a shared responsibility between Fish and Wildlife Service, our other partner agencies, and community members to make this happen. And in the end, I think that's what's going to make the refuge the most successful and the most sustainable in the long run. And as I said, we do have wildlife out there, even though we're just farm fields. This is a picture from earlier in the winter with lots of snow geese on the property. So if you can drive, just 5 miles from downtown Albuquerque and see snow geese and sandhill cranes and roadrunners and bald eagles, then, it's a pretty exciting place with lots of possibilities, especially when we start to think about the habitat restoration that we're going to do on the property. So as Alicia mentioned, we have these 8 standards of excellence for our urban refuges. And Valle de Oro is one of the very first refuges that's being built completely under these new standards of excellence. We have other urban refuges across the country, but they were built sometimes as more traditional refuges and before these standards of excellence were designed. But Valle de Oro, everything that we do is keeping in mind these standards of excellence and how we're going to move forward to use these standards of excellence to the best of our ability, to be a model for hopefully some of the best practices for how we exhibit these standards of excellence, and really to kind of road test them and work on them, with community members, and in the hopes that we can help inspire and support future refuge development and the advancement of other refuges across the country. So the first standard, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through the standards and kind of tell you how Valle de Oro accomplishes those at this point. So our first standard is knowing and relating to the community. The first thing, as I said, is that this is a community refuge. We always want to frame it as this is your national wildlife refuge. Please come out, even though it looks just like farm fields, please come out and be a part of it, be a part of the design, be a part of the development. Community members were the ones who spearheaded the establishment of the refuge, and so knowing these community members, relating to them, and pulling them into the process every step of the way is really important. And most people have heard me say this before, but I say it all the time. No matter what my bosses tell you, it is not my job to build a national wildlife refuge. It is my job to be a facilitator for the community to help them build what they envision on the property. My job is really to take the community's ideas and put those together with sound science and engineering to create something that's sustainable for wildlife and people. So my job is really to work for the community and to facilitate something that serves the multiple purposes of this land. So we started with working with the University of New Mexico, and we had students in the community and regional planning department who did semester-long laboratory work and studio work on helping to design the refuge, and they did a lot of background and research information and helped propose designs and innovative ideas. And this, again, fits in with one of the big important tenets of what Valle de Oro is that everything should be a learning experience. Every opportunity we have, students should get an opportunity to try out their hand at it as well. We then had a National Public Lands Day in September of 2013, which was a year after the refuge was officially established, but before we finished buying all the land. We didn't even have all the land purchased, but we were so confident in the community's ability to push this forward that we said, we're going to start thinking about what's going to happen out here. And so we had a festival on the refuge where 300 community members showed up to help give their ideas about what they would like to see happen. And we had lots of fun games and food and animals like rehab, birds, and all kinds of fun stuff going on. And we engaged the youngest in some craft exercises and drawings and designs, all aimed at finding out what kids wanted to see on the property, all the way through their parents and grandparents. So that was a really great kickoff to this community-centered planning. Then we did some conceptual designs. We're working on wetland restoration. We're thinking about the interpretive messages from the very beginning. What are the educational and interpretive messages that we want to convey, and how do we then create facilities that help us get that information across? We've been working with the National Park Service because we have a historic trail, the El Camino Real de Tierra Adentro, that goes right through the property. And we've had multiple public meetings. Our first official public meeting, we put up blank maps of the refuge. We gave people a lot of background information about what refuges are and what urban refuges are, and then we let people give their ideas. We didn't come forward with anything. And that was a really cool public meeting because we had 150 people show up for that. And I don't know about the kind of community or public meetings that you guys go to, but I've been to some where they're just a handful of people, and if there's 100 or more people there, they're usually carrying protest signs and yelling, and they're upset about something. So to have 150 community members show up and talk about how excited they were about this project and give ideas was really great. But what was even better than that was that we had another public meeting to present conceptual designs based on everybody's input, and then we got so much reassurance where people said, hey, that was my idea. Thanks for listening. Oh, I like how you included that. So it really, kind of reinforced that idea that we were on the right track and that community involvement was really being appreciated and taken advantage of. And that little word cloud there is a lot of the different words that came out of all these planning efforts that we use to kind of help us think about where we're going. And then to continue that, we have monthly open houses where we're out on the refuge. I am a one-person permanent full-time staff. I have a term position, so that's like a short-term position that allows, that does environmental education, and then we have multiple AmeriCorps Vistas and lots of volunteers working on the refuge, but all of this that you're seeing is getting accomplished is being accomplished with only one full-time permanent staff, and that's because of the direction and support of community members. But we do have those monthly open houses and do tons of outreach events. So our standard 2 is about connecting urban people with nature via stepping stones of engagement. So I thought this would be a good time to talk about Mountain View community. And this is, if you're seeing a picture of a mountain, on your screen, this is what a lot of people think Mountain View is, and this is actually a view of the Sandia Mountains from Valle de Oro. But really, this is what most of the Mountain View community looks like. It's a highly industrial area mixed in with residential neighborhoods. And this map shows all the different industries that are present, the multiple Superfund sites, like the GE Aircraft Engine Superfund, the AT and SF Superfund site. And the president of our neighborhood association often likes to say that the city of Albuquerque kind of prefers not to have these kind of industrial facilities within the city limits, so they kind of use zoning to push a lot of this into Mountain View. So Mountain View is the community for Albuquerque and Bernalillo County that houses all the industry. This is the General Electric Superfund site. And then some information here, 78% of our people in Mountain View are Chicano Mexicano. More than half of them speak Spanish as their primary language. And in terms of poverty, nearly 40% of the families with children are so poor they'd have to triple their income to climb above the federal poverty line. We, of course, house the sewage treatment plant for all of Albuquerque, where most of the residents in the neighborhood have to still have septic tanks. And we're in the direct flight path of the airport and the Kirtland Air Force Base. So because of that, the Mountain View community has been a leader in the environmental justice movement, not just in the Albuquerque area or New Mexico, but nationwide. And in 1990, a group called the Southwest Organizing Project wrote a letter to the top 10 conservation groups like Sierra Club, and the Nature Conservancy, basically accusing them of racist and exclusionary practices. And so in this neighborhood, the word conservation had been a dirty word for a long time. So how do you build a national wildlife refuge whose whole purpose is connecting communities to conservation when a neighborhood thinks that conservation is something that is for other people? And that's what's really exciting about Valle de Oro is the community came together to fight for something positive. Many of the people in the neighborhood had no idea what a national wildlife refuge was, but they knew that it would help bring good air quality, help protect water, and help protect land, and provide for their children. And so this is one of the things that brought so many people together around something that they might not have really known about before. So partnerships, in order to purchase the property, $18.5 million. Many people thought it would take 5 years. Some people thought 6 years. Some people thought it would never happen. But we actually completed the land acquisition in less than 2 years because of all these different partners. And the main point of this story is that 50% of the funding came from outside of the federal government. It was the county, it was the state, it was nonprofit organizations, it was NIFWIS grants through Walmart or Wells Fargo. It was community organizations like the Neighborhood Association who gave $200 towards the land acquisition. The community, the Neighborhood Association, that's a huge chunk of their budget. For them to give $200 was a really big deal. Standard 3 is all about building partnerships, and that's certainly the success of this refuge. The formation of the Friends of Valle de Oro happened before the refuge was even established. The Friends group was formed before the refuge was established. And then we are an urban refuge partnership site, just like Alicia talked about. We're a pilot site for the National Phenology Network's Nature's Notebook Citizen Science Program, which helps us collect baseline data. We work with the Federal Highway Administration on a climate change scenario planning project to help our city grow responsibly. And we are just recently named an Urban Migratory Bird Treaty City, which really is great because it means the refuge is partnering with the city of Albuquerque, with Bernalillo County, with the state of New Mexico, with our Audubon groups, and lots of different organizations. So being a community asset, this map that you're seeing is the flood zone, and you can see basically everything that you see flooded is the Mountain View community. And so a big part of Valle de Oro is moving stormwater through the refuge to help prevent flooding in our neighborhood, but also to use that water for habitat and for wildlife. This is a conceptual design about what the refuge might look like. This is what was based on that year and a half of community input. The conceptual designs for the refuge are located on our website if you'd like to see them. And what you can see here, the big thing I want to bring your attention to is this green S that kind of goes down the one side of the property. That's going to be stormwater drainage. So instead of having a big concrete ditch like we see all over the rest of the city, we are going to see a big habitat feature that helps provide habitat for wildlife, education opportunities for visiting students, helps prevent flooding in our neighborhood, and helps use biofiltration to clean the water and put more clean water back into the Rio Grande.
Jennifer, I just want to give you a heads up that we're getting down towards the end of, I know you have a number of standards to go through, but you have
I'm almost done.
Okay,
yeah.
Awesome.
Cool. Ensuring adequate long-term resources. For us right now, this is about working with kids. So we have a junior backyard bird count. We have a young birders club that meets once a month. And we have conservation career fairs with lots of different partners who come. Providing equitable access. This is something really exciting that we just received a little over $12.5 million from the Federal Lands Access Program to build a hike and bike trail along 2nd Street, the main road that goes through the Mountain View neighborhood. And as you can see in that picture, people in our neighborhood, many of them walk everywhere, and there are no sidewalks and no shoulders. So this is going to be a great asset to our community to help them get around their neighborhood and also access the refuge. Making sure our visitors feel safe and welcome is what other people have been talking about, trying new things, trying to incorporate art, history, making sure that everybody feels like they have a place and something they can connect to. And finally, modeling sustainability, being a great representative of how businesses and how people in their individual lives can connect with the land and be responsible stewards. So we're really looking into that, and we're going to see more of that as we actually get into designing facilities. So I think later information will be put up to find out more about Valle de Oro, but Valle de Oro is the community refuge for those in Albuquerque, but it also belongs to all of us who are working in connecting urban audiences with the outdoors and with birding and with nature. So hopefully you'll be involved and you'll stay in touch. We have a really great Facebook page where we post things pretty much daily. We've got a website, so stay involved. Anytime you come to Albuquerque, come visit us and see where it's going. And I'm done.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jennifer, and thank you to Pepe and Alicia for some really great presentations. We have about 15 minutes now and time for some questions and discussion, so I'd like to open things up. We're going to put some slides on the screen that will rotate through that have contact information for our presenters and links where you can find more information about all of the things that they talked about. You can unmute yourself if you use, I hear that some people have unmuted themselves with the background information there. You can ask a question or you can type it in the chat box and we will address it there.
Really good.
So, Alicia, here's a question that I have for you. If somebody didn't realize that their city was an urban bird treaty city and they would like to become involved in an existing city, or if they're in a city that is not currently a city and would like to become one, what advice or recommendations would you have?
So I'm sad that they didn't know that they were an urban bird treaty city if they were living in one. But so they're certainly contacting me, and I can put anybody in contact with the city partners and city officials that are working on that urban bird treaty city. So if you are one of the 21 and want to get connected and engaged, I'm happy to make those connections. If you are not currently an urban bird treaty city but would like to be, then I'm also willing to talk to you about that. I'm sure there are many people who are interested in working on becoming an urban bird treaty city, or at least doing some of the work that goes along with our 6 goals. And so, I think probably, Jennie, the the first step would be contact me, and I'll provide some direction. And in the meanwhile, certainly go to the website. And if you just even Google Urban Bird Treaty, you should be able to come up with our website. And we do have that handbook resources and a lot of other resources on that site. And so that would be the first step, is thinking about, what can you do? And I'm happy to make those connections.
Great. Other questions for our presenters?
I have a question. This is Glenn Johnson. I'm with the Puget Sound Bird Observatory. And this is a question for Alicia and also Jennifer. I'm in the position of helping the Puget Sound Bird Observatory and some other partners set up some both monitoring stations as well as educational opportunities. And I was wondering if you could just speak to the role of bird banding as a monitoring tool and educational tool as well, and sort of balancing the educational and scientific opportunities of using bird banding. And basically, using bird banding as an educational tool. I've seen it criticized before, if it's not, especially if it's not grounded in a scientific program. So I was wondering if you could just speak to some of your efforts to sort of ensure that bird banding for educational purposes, how that's connected to the wider scientific programs.
Yeah, so I'll start, Jennifer, and then if you want to add anything. So I think the bird banding lab is pretty specific. When they authorize the permits that authorize the banding of birds, they're pretty specific about those needs relating to scientific discovery and being very project-focused and so forth. And so there's not always a lot of wiggle room for education within what the bird banding lab requires related to those permits. So they're your first stop to confirm and make sure that what you're doing is actually legal and actually acceptable underneath that banding permit. I think the value of banding as an education tool is fabulous, because, wow, what a great opportunity to have people look at birds, whether it's mistnet or whatever else, and they see this bird up close, and you put a tag on it, and you can talk about the migration, and you can talk about the full life cycle, and you can talk about conservation efforts and, those sorts of things. And so when done well, it can be a very valuable education tool, and I love that aspect of banding. But it has to be done well, and it has to be done properly. And again, legally, it has to be legally defendable when you are looking at your particular permit.
And I'll just add that we were able to set up a banding station at Valle de Oro because of the funding from the Urban Migratory Bird Treaty City program. And so we were able to get a group who does banding research in the area to add our site as another site. And of course, we had the interest of making sure that we are getting good baseline data to see how our habitat restoration is going to affect the diversity and population of species. But we also made sure that we were going with a group who was really well versed in dealing with the public, because we want people involved in every aspect of the refuge. So we had a banding station set up every Friday in the fall, and we had school groups who came to it, and we had a Native American Youth Corps who helped out with it, and we had interns who helped out with it. So its primary purpose was gathering biologic data for us, but we took every advantage to make sure that community was involved, and we were doing outreach programs with it. But that also took a lot of effort to make sure that there were enough staff and enough trained volunteers who could actually do the work of banding while making sure to keep the integrity of the scientific data and the health and safety of the birds as a primary consideration.
Great. Thank you for those answers, and thanks to the speakers today. They were all really excellent programs you guys provided.
Other questions for our presenters? Or if folks have experiences of your own in working with urban audiences, things that have been successful for you that you'd like to share. I'm sure we'd all like to hear that.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, my name is Khalil Kettering. I'm actually located in Washington, D.C., and this was very enlightening for me. One of the things I found interesting in a couple of different slides, you talked about the different key principles in order to have a successful public engagement, and you kept talking about having bridges, points for engagement, and I was just wondering if there's any sort of BMPs or any sort of document of the successful practices that have been done to implement that and to successfully engage with different communities, because the process of what you're saying, what I've seen, the process of how you engage is so important. So if there's any models on that which you can share.
So this is Alicia, and I will suggest that, wow, there's probably resources. And Pepe, maybe you could even point us in a direction of the EE capacity and, some of the resources available there. But, I think we have some suggestions in our Urban Bird Treaty handbook, and then, but not specific to what you're actually asking for. I know also Environment for the Americas has a lot of resources and tools on their website, but Pepe and Jennifer, maybe you guys have some direct things you could point people to.
Can you repeat again what type of resources? I had to move away from my phone for 10 seconds, and I missed part of the question.
Sure. I was just talking about how there's a lot of talk about the importance of building bridges of engagement, points of engagement for the communities, and I forget which slide it was, but it was one of the key points. And I was just reiterating that the process of how you do this is so important to make sure that there's trust built and that you have this community engagement. And I was wondering if there's any models that are replicable that you can share that can be taken to different areas.
Yeah. Well, I think that the Center for Whole Communities, if you go to their website, it should be centerforwholecommunities.org. They have plenty of resources, guides, publications, and even case studies. And they offer a wonderful whole thinking retreat opportunity and other workshops that they offer also in urban areas. I participated in their retreat in the farm where they're located, but they've started doing more of those in urban areas. And they offer great tools there. So you should check their website. There's also, as part of e-capacity, we offered an online course that Akima Price was leading on. Actually, the name was Bridging Communities through Environmental Education, and I'm pretty sure that some of the discussions and some of the resources that were presented there are still available online. I would recommend go to e-capacity and go to online courses. If you need more information beyond what you find there, you can always send me an email and I can connect you to Akima. What else? We're going to be coming up with guidelines on working with communities in environmental education, which a lot of it is going to be around this. They are in the works right now, but as part of the process, we're going to have a learning community, an online learning community, where basically participants are going to be getting early drafts of the guidelines and help us bringing their input to them, but also there's going to be opportunities for having webinars and exchange ideas around this. And so if you're interested in that, that's another opportunity that's coming later this year. We should announce it, I'm thinking, early in the summer or sometime around May, for it to happen on the second half of the year. Those are some that I can think of right now. There's others that I don't have at the top of my head, but I'll be happy, again, if you send me an email, I'll be happy to share more of those with you. And if others are interested, I can always also share them with Jennie so that she can share with the group.
Yeah, I was just going to say we can put together a list of resources. If any of our presenters have manuals or other websites or things, we can very easily put together a sheet and send it out to everybody who provided your email in the chat box.
And this is Jennifer. I just want to mention one other thing with regards to our urban refuges, is we have a great fish and wildlife website, fws.gov/urban, and it lists the standards of excellence. And under our Connecting Urban People with Nature via Stepping Stones of Engagement, there's information about kind of what it looks like, the kinds of questions that you should be asking, what's the payoff, what are some of the guideposts to know that you're really implementing this standard. And then there's a little section on strategies for activities that are going to help you implement it, and then a section on assessing how you're doing and what the outcomes are, how you're measuring if you're reaching this standard of excellence. So that's a good resource to start with too.
Great, thank you so much.
Any other questions or comments for our presenters, or just to share with the group in general? I will leave the chat box open for a few minutes after we finish up, and so if folks hadn't entered their email addresses before but would like to do so now, go for it, and we'll make sure to send you any follow-up information about this topic. All right. Well, I would like to invite everybody to please stay engaged, continue the discussion. The slide that's on your screens right now shows you how to find Beak. If you're on Twitter, you can just search for the hashtag BirdEdChat. We've had a nice lively discussion going on over the course of the webinar. You can also join our Facebook group. I see that 3 or 4 people have joined since the webinar started, which is great. That's probably the best way to get information. We have a listserv. It's not very active. You won't get bombarded with hundreds of messages, but that's how we send out some critical information. You can find that information on our website. And we have started recording our webinars, and there's the link where you can access the Beak YouTube channel. The last thing I want to say is, just as Casey mentioned at the beginning, our webinars are every 2 months, so our next webinar will be Wednesday, June 3rd at the same time, and the theme will be announced, but I think it is likely to be communicating about anthropogenic causes of bird mortality. We'll share more information with that as soon as it's available. So thanks so much to our 3 speakers, and thanks to all of you for participating, and we hope to see you again in June.
Thank you,
Jennie and Jordan.